Welcome to The Mandate, a show featuring intimate conversations about men's mental health, masculinity, and identity. We bring you stories to inspire you, experts to guide you, and the tools you need to become the man you truly want to be. It's time to sit back, relax, and open up. Live from the Mandate Studio in Austin, Texas, here's your host, Adam Hoffman.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for those of you that are hanging out with us right now, and to anybody else who watches this afterwards. My name's Adam Hoffman, and this is The Mandate, a show that I created to bring awareness and support, tips, tricks, techniques, and stories for men to explore their mental health and well-being. So these conversations are with both men, women, people who identify as non-binary, and everything in between who want to talk about and share their experiences with mental health. We've got a really special guest here today who's one of my newest friends. We've been chatting and collaborating for a little while here, and she is up to some really special stuff and is uniquely qualified to talk about men's mental health and men's issues here today. So she will be joining us shortly. Looks like we have a little bit of a issue here, so let's try inviting her up again. Dawn, thanks for joining us tonight. Good to see you again. Excited to chat on another episode here coming up shortly. We are just waiting for our special guest tonight to join us. All right, well, while that is going on, I'll kind of jump into how I met Amanda. So I've been working with a coach for the last couple months who was introduced to me from, and there she is, right on cue.
I had to allow the camera and the microphone. You know, I work in tech, but I often turn off a lot of things on my phone.
Yeah, I know, it's funny. As well as I feel like I know you right now, I was still trying to do my usual sleuthing. And I just couldn't find anything about you. So you've done a great job of hiding yourself from the internet. Kudos to you. All right, well, so I was just telling people how you and I met. So my coach, Matt Helt, who's going to be on here in, I think next week, actually, he's going to be joining us, which will be a fun session. I've been talking to Matt for a while, and as soon as I told him that I was super passionate about this thing, I think it's going to be my calling, he's like, I think you got to meet Bender. And I was like, cool. Bender sounds like an awesome guy. And then I get the email intro and I find out that Bender is in fact Amanda Bender, a woman who is really passionate about men's mental health and well-being. And I was like, this is fascinating. I can't wait to get to know her. And I think you and I have talked at least once a week since we've met about this issue. So with that, who is Amanda? Who is Bender, the human? And why are you such a unique person to be here talking about men's mental health?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Aloha, everybody. Nice to see you on Instagram Live. So I'm Amanda Bender. I go by Bender, which is my last name. It's just something people started calling me when I was playing sports in high school, and it's carried on. But yeah, so who am I? What am I doing? I'm the founder and CEO of Kilo, which is an app for men to track qualitative data like quality of sleep, energy, mood, libido, relationships, in order to improve mental health and happiness. So I'll tell you a bit about my background and actually how I came there, or came to the insight that Kilo was born from. So let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Who am I as a human? So I was born in Hawaii, which I love. And at a young age, my parents separated because my dad was very heavy into cocaine at the time in the 70s, living in Hawaii, managing a restaurant, staying up late. And my mom was just like, hey, we have a kid now. This isn't gonna shake out. And I'm sure there was other, marital issues there, but they separated and moved to California. And my dad was always in my life. I'd go spend time with him every summer until I was in high school. And I wasn't really sure what was happening with his addiction until I got older, but my family was very honest about it. And from that point, I would probably say when I was in maybe middle school, became more aware of it. I started asking a lot of questions about what's drug addiction? What are the symptoms? What does that mean? I was very curious about mental health and wellness from a young age. And my mom did her best, but she was like, why are you asking why all the time? I'm like, I'm just a curious human. So then went off to college. Actually, I was in high school. Let me say this. I was in high school and I had a great class my senior year of high school in psychology, which I don't think at the time in the late 90s, many high schools were offering psychology as an elective.
No way.
No way. Yeah. And I went to a public school in California, and Mrs. McFarlane was her name. And she had a great psychology course. We talked about Freud. We actually watched the movie Kids. We had to get our parents to sign a release form, but it was about kids, living in New York, and about the AIDS pandemic and safe and unsafe sex. And I was like, I like this psychology stuff. What is this about? And so I studied it in undergrad, and I realized that I thought I was really interested in sports psychology at the time. And I realized, after studying it a bit, that I didn't want to necessarily work directly with athletes. So graduated college, came back to California, and was just floating around like, what can I do with a psychology degree? And I worked with some families with children that had autism, which was very rewarding. And so I asked more questions about autism and what that is, what the symptomology was, what it looked like, how it actually showed up in daily lives for the individual with autism and also the family. And then I went to grad school. I was like, okay, I think I want to be a therapist. I'm very fascinated by, mental health and wellness. And sometimes people that choose to be therapists often hear that they're good at talking to people, or they have the drive of like wanting to help. My fascination was with understanding, was really being curious and understanding how many different people could exhibit similar symptoms, but yet they showed up in their lives in different ways. And so I went to graduate school for a master's in clinical psych, and I had a private practice as an intern for 1 year, and I worked with students in school and their families. And I realized that there's just this beautiful potential humans have for change, but it's very, very, very difficult. So I wanted to do research then on the brain. And so, yeah, right, natural progression.
Naturally.
Naturally. So I took a job in a neuroscience research lab at UCLA, working with patients with long-term chronic mental illness, so people with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And I did all the clinical interviewing and the recruitment for the participants who worked with us at the lab. And so I had to ask the questions like, how many psychotic episodes have you had? What do your delusions look like? To really understand if the symptomology matched for the studies. Studies, they have to be quite critical on symptoms people need in order to match for a study. Anyway, yeah, I'm just so fascinated by human behavior and the brain, and metacognition, thinking about our thinking. And then one of the doctors I worked with started running an intervention study with patients to teach them something called theory of mind. So how we think about our thinking and how we think about other people's thinking. And it had to do a lot with empathy and the 6 main emotions. And we had 2 groups. Anyway, we found that the training definitely helped the patient group just function better in society by understanding more about empathy and sarcasm and the main emotions. I was like, I think I want to do this, but I want to do this with adolescents. And so I had, an opportunity to apply to get a PhD, or to do the other thing that I did, which was leave the field and go work in technology. And a lot of people were like, wait, what? And my partner at the time that I was with when I was making this decision, who's still a friend of mine, he's a front-end web developer. And he said, you know, you have this interesting skill set where you're good at talking to people, and engineers aren't great at talking to people. This is his experience. And he's like, I think you would be a good project manager or product manager. And I was like, who is going to hire me? You know, I teach undergraduate psychology. I work in a neuroscience research lab. He's like, I don't know, you'll figure it out. So I took a jump in 2015 into a tech company, and it was a wild ride. And then fast forward to 2018, I was working with a friend on an app for women on something we were calling cycle syncing. So we were going to give women predictive programming, strength programming, depending upon where the woman was in her menstrual cycle or her cycle in general. And I started diving more into women's menstrual apps and how women track qualitative data in order to get this predictions of PMS, when a woman's period is going to start. And I was like, there's a lot of research around how qualitative data can help people become more self-aware and insightful. I was having coffee with a friend in San Francisco in 2018, a guy, and I said, do you track your qualitative metrics, like your quality of your like libido or your relationships or your energy? And he's like, that's interesting. I think you should call the app Don't Be a Dick.
I hadn't heard
We
that yet.
both had such a good laugh, right? Because it was so just raw in that moment, like the sentiment. And so I started tinkering, and we ran a couple pilots in 2019 because I'm very much a realist, you know, someone who's worked in research. I know you have to be able to replicate things over and over and over and over. And so then was ready to make this thing, you know, more real. So started Kilo in early this year, and working with a team of engineers building the app currently, and are going to be launching it to a closed group of testers so that we can really check in on what's happening, like how are men tracking qualitative data, and how can we make men's life a little better.
Yeah, it sounds great. I'm in. And you made me remember too, because one of the things that I started doing is that that's been really helpful for me is tracking it. And I remember when I showed Matt how like this template that I've made that I've been using for like the last 3 months, that's like my daily check-in. And he, you know, I think that was probably one of those things too. He was like, oh, I need to connect these dots. Cause then when you showed me the screenshots of the prototype of the app, I was like, oh yeah, this is basically like what's in half of my journal every single day. And I can't tell you like just how helpful it is to start my day in the morning thinking about how I'm feeling, you know, which as opposed to just like starting to do and go, because then, you know, I'm sure you can explain all the physiological stuff behind it, but like, you know, you wake up, your cortisol spiking, you just get straight to it. It doesn't actually have a time to come down. Then you're basically operating with this heightened sense throughout the rest of your day. All this other stuff gets thrown at you. You hit the end of the day, you're just exhausted, tired, you want to go to bed, and then, oh, guess what? You get to go and do it again. And so like inserting these little breaks for me has been really helpful. I know we're going to talk about the app for sure, but today we're definitely going to dig into like barriers for men when it comes to mental health and really what gets in the way from doing this kind of work. I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about, aside from seeing that there's a whole bunch of apps for women, you know, to track for this stuff and having that conversation, like what else about it? Why men?
So men are completely underserved in the mental health market. I don't think there's anything, well, most men's apps focus on physicality, right? How many pounds did you lift? Are you ripped? How buff are you? You know, like 30 days to being shredded. And I say it with that voice just because like that's the voice that I hear. Where I'm like, what about all the other things? Like how shredded is your mental health? Does your mental health have muscles? Because
it's shredded because it's just destroyed.
Not six pack because it's been working out so much.
There's no six pack up there. I'm working on it though.
Right. And this is how I often think about mental health, especially for men, is it's an underused muscle because men aren't checking in more days than not on how they're doing. So if a friend asks, "Hey Adam, how are you doing?" Most likely you haven't been checking in with yourself more days than not. I mean, you're a person who's actually doing that on your own. Maybe some men are journaling, maybe some men are doing their own mood tracker or tracking of their own in spreadsheets. But it's hard to extract that data, right? To say, oh, my relationship is on an upswing. Not only am I feeling that in my life, but I'm seeing a visual representation of that change. Or, oh shit, my libido, my sociability, and my energy's down because my sleep has been terrible. And to be able to see that and also feel it, I think is very powerful, because at the fundamental level, if we want to move the needle in men's mental health and decrease the fact that men commit suicide 3.5 times more often than women, like, let me just say that again. Men commit suicide 3.5 times more often than women. That's fucking insane. Why? Because I think at this fundamental level, we, as a society, we haven't allowed it to be okay for men to say, I'm going to feel all the emotions. None of them are better than the others. And my friends around me are going to support me when I'm stressed or angry or frustrated, or catch me when they think I'm being burnt out. And so I think that's starting to happen for men. More and more men are starting to like want those types of friendships and check in. But I think it's important to check in with oneself first and be like, am I a self-aware person? Do I actually know what the quality of my life is like? Because that impacts my quantitative life, right? Like my workouts and my calories and my performance at work or performance across the board.
Yeah, I mean, so there's so much in here too, because it's like the stuff that, well, let me go back a little bit first. So when we're talking about getting help and society and culture and what gets reinforced, right? Like I think about, yeah, I had lovely parents and didn't hear this very much. What I remember from my dad growing up was, if I was playing a sport, hockey in particular, him banging on the glass, being like, "Be aggressive, Adam, be aggressive, Adam." But I don't ever remember getting a ton from my parents in the form of like, man up, tough it out, suck it up, all that stuff. But I got that from plenty of other places, right? Like whether it was
Mm-hmm.
just kids that I was with, other people's parents, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess like having these feelings that I'm having, like that's not an okay thing to do. I just need to like bottle them up, tough it up, and keep grinding it out. Well, yeah, and then you keep doing that and it reinforces that like that's the only way. And then maybe you're lucky enough as a kid that you developed some form of like emotional intelligence, but I would probably guess most don't. And so then you get to an adult and you're like, well, I have all these feelings. I don't know what to do with them. And then I found out recently through talking to some other guys that like there's a category of guys out there that like the idea of feelings don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they really are just like sensations in the body, just like hunger that have no label. They're there. And that to
Mm-hmm.
me was like really fascinating when I discovered that recently. I was like, oh, okay, well, that's even like a step removed from being able to say, hey, I'm feeling something. It's like, yeah, no, that's not there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that and just being transparent about it, because what we're trying to do at Kilo is in the app to make it very simple to check in daily, right? You and I were talking about earlier. I think about Kilo as like floss for men's mental health, like use it daily. We were talking like, I floss more days than not, but I know people don't. But that's the point, is it needs to become more of a habit to check in with oneself. And at Kilo, instead of asking questions like, how is your energy today? We've given a quantitative scale to a qualitative marker
Hmm.
to make it a little bit easier, because we know that people, especially men, are like looking at a quantitative scale is like very comfortable, right? Like, so did you lift, 50 kilos or did you lift 100 kilos? Did you complete 5 tasks or 500 tasks? Like, did you eat X amount of calories or this? So it's familiar. So we're trying to bridge the gap of understanding quantitative data and familiarizing oneself with qualitative data.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I mean, I think that's a topic that I've been thinking about more often is if we really are going to start trying to shift the stigma and, replace these negative, I don't know, societal pressures or norms or what have you with new ones, you can't just come in all hot with like, oh, there's just this new way to do it. You just do it this way, right? Like you have to really meet people where they're at, and it comes, it's things like that, right? Where these, these micro behaviors or ways to meet people where they are, where you can say, hey guys, we know that you're comfortable with numbers more often than not. Like if I ask you how you are, I'll probably just tell you, hey, I'm okay, I'm fine. But if you give me a number scale, fine could be a 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like you don't
Mm-hmm.
have, you might not have, or I might not have in that moment the vocabulary to say like, oh, well, a 2 for me is actually pretty like that's shit, whereas like a 7 is really great. And so that's one piece for sure. And then I think, Don mentions here in the comments, and shout out to Don for getting this going. I forgot to say in the beginning, if you're hanging out here and you ever have a question, drop a comment in. I think you're probably like 15 to 20 seconds behind, but I'm keeping an eye on those, so we'll come back and grab them. So if you've got anything for Amanda or myself, just let us know and we'll come back to them. So yeah, exactly. So talk a little bit about some of the other stuff that you've learned so far working with men so closely to build out this platform.
Yes. When we ran the pilots, I thought the bulk of the value would be the insights Kilo was providing. So whether the data visualizations from the data men were inputting, we were doing an SMS pilot. So I would text men daily and ask them to report on 9 qualitative markers, and then send a reminder daily to check in. So just first and foremost, I think that's really important for establishing any new habit, is to not just assume that you can give it 7 days, because research shows it usually takes a human 21 days or slightly more, slightly less to establish a habit. So that's part of why Kilo uses SMS, because we know 100% of people check their SMS daily. Push notifications often, I'm just like, swipe, swipe, swipe. So in the pilot, I thought the insights were going to bring the most robust value for the men that tested in the pilot. And on the debrief calls, since my background's in research and therapy, I like to ask the questions that aren't going to confirm my hypothesis, but that will teach me something else. And a lot of the men said they didn't think that checking in daily would actually be something that would help them become more self-aware. And so they said it would take them, a minute to think about the quality of their day and rate themselves on these 9 markers. And then they started to remember from day to day, from week to week, each pilot was 30 days, like, oh, when I started this, I was here. And now at the end, I'm here. And that's a slight change, which is positive. The other thing is men asked if they could change some of the markers. Put in personal markers. And a friend who's also in the pilot was like, I want to track how aggressive I'm feeling, because I want to get better at expressing aggression. So I don't want it to come off as, maybe scary or I don't want people to feel like I'm angry when I'm expressing my aggression. And I think that's a really cool thing, because there's a way to express aggression that isn't terrifying to other people. But you have to first be aware of it, right? I think those were the main things. And now having conversations with men, and why I was so excited that you wanted to have me on, is that I really want to talk more and more about the barriers to men's mental health, because it's not the same for every man. I've heard emotional stuntedness. I've heard, well, my wife tells me I don't think that deeply. I've heard, like Dawn said, like this idea of like, don't be a pussy or a bitch. And I'm like, okay, what are the underpinnings there? Where does that actually come from? Like, where is it taught? How is it enforced? And I think with Kilo, if we can make these small incremental changes by checking in daily, we can start to shift that paradigm. Kilo is not magic, but we have to find these small ways to enter in and to shift the behavior and then the narrative over time.
I'm totally with you on that. One thing that comes to mind is that I'm pretty pretty high on your guys' potential with Kilo, right? But what I've been thinking about is, as part of this barrier, this one of the stigmas that exist is, so you get all these guys that are just loving Kilo. What can we do to help them feel comfortable going to their guy friends and being like, hey guys, I've been tracking my feelings for the last 30 days and it's made my life awesome, right? Like,
Yeah.
talk about a really, really uncomfortable conversation if you've never had it before, right? So like, how do you create going back to what we were talking about earlier, like the right language, right? Like, how do you create courage and bravery and strength to go and do that, to get over that fear of like, oh, they might reject me, then I won't have any friends. What are they going to think of me? I mean, there's so much stuff layered in here.
There's a couple things. So we have been talking about this space within Kilo, within the app, that let's say you and Dawn and Matt are all using Kilo. Maybe like you and Matt are having a conversation about new tech you started using this week or something like that. Or you're looking for something to check in more with your relationships. I don't know if guys talk about that, but or like your sleep, your energy, your motivation, and a friend's like, oh, yo, you should check out this thing called Kilo. Like, you can track your shit there, and mind my swearing. Sorry, it's just my personality. And he's like, okay, like Matt's like, okay, I'll check it out. And then eventually I was thinking it would be great to have some community within there. So you and a few friends can actually share a portion of Kilo with each other. So there's a portion of Kilo that looks holistically at the head, the heart, and the body from the data that a guy has put into the app. So how is your head? How is your heart? How is your body? And that there might be this way to share a snapshot of that. And then maybe talk within the app to feel a little more comfortable about it. And then, have those conversations eventually in real life, whatever that looks like in the future. Whether it's like a text to like a guy friend, like, hey, I saw that you're crushing it with like your heart markers, like fucking keep it up, like,
yes, that'll be the day.
Tell your friend he's doing a good fucking job at his relationship,
Yep. Well, and Nick brings up a good point here. Nick works at a cool company called Rise Science. They do some similar stuff with sleep. But as he points out, for them, it's not about like, we're not a sleep app. Like, yes, you track your sleep in it, but it's about having better days. And I think that's kind of what you're saying here too, is that, yeah, you're doing all this stuff in the app, but that's producing this outcome. Let's get people talking about this outcome. Naturally, people who are curious will say, well, how are you doing that? And it'll open up this conversation about like, oh, well, I've started tracking these things and, here's what it's doing for me. Which is great. Like we need those early adopters that are willing to lean into this stuff and make it happen so that it does become more normal for everyone else. But what are some of the other things that have come up for you as you've kind of explored the topic of barriers for men and mental health?
Yeah, actually, I was going to say before that, Nick, thanks for posting that. It made me think about, when someone started a new health regimen and you haven't seen them in a while, you're like, hey, you look really good. Like, what are you doing? Or someone started a new workout program, or they've started tidying up in a different way. I don't know, whatever it is for them. You're like, oh, damn, you look good. I would love that to be the case for men's mental health. So you notice your friend is actively listening a little more, is a little more engaged in what you have to say. Maybe his conversations have not necessarily, everything doesn't have to be positive and rosy and rainbows, but maybe he's being what you experience as a little more authentic, a little less guarded. Maybe you hug each other a little longer, you know, or maybe when you give each other a high five, you also like hold each other's hand. You're like, man, I'm happy you exist. And you start to see people and you're like, damn, you're looking good. What's going on? You're like, I'm flossing my mental health. Doing great.
There you go. And then like everybody will know the like, you know, the obligatory, oh well, this is the kilo at floss move. You know, everybody's
Right.
doing it around their waist right now, but then you guys are going to invent the next dance move that's up here. It'll be great. I'll be the
Yeah.
first one to adopt it and post it on all my socials.
What are other barriers to men's mental health? I think a lot of it is support. Um, Women have been socialized to have conversations about feelings. And I think this word feelings has kind of, for men, has somewhat of a negative connotation. And I'm not sure why, because everyone has feelings. Emotions are biological. It's something that happens in our brain and then we feel it. You know, there's actually neurochemicals that are released. So it's not a negative thing. And so I think more community, especially of men, talking about what are feelings, what do they mean, and being honest about saying, I'm not totally sure. I don't think there's harm in raising one's hand or nodding one's head and saying like, I don't totally get this.
Yeah.
How can I learn more? Um,
I think Don brings up a good point
yeah.
here too, is that like it's what it just made me think of was I forget what exactly it was when I was a kid, but like my mom had to open up the pill and mix it in with applesauce, right? And like that's kind of what I feel like a lot of this stuff is happening right now. When as I've been exploring this space, you know, a lot of the early stuff that I saw that was being done for men in particular were these wilderness retreats, because it's
Mhm.
like hell yeah, I'll sign up to go hang out in the woods and like throw axes and shoot guns and do man stuff for a weekend, right? And then like you get there and then you just get like ripped open, and you're forced to confront, you know, your past and your programming and what got you here so that you can have that experience to build it back up. Now, I don't think that necessarily works for everybody. Like I have plenty of guy friends that would be like, yeah, no, I'm not just gonna go and hang out in the woods. But like, you know, there's another version of that that's for me, but it's still, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. Like if we have to disguise it, then let's disguise it just progressively as little as possible so that we, you know, we still get to that same um, end result. And then I think what Keza says as well around vulnerability, it just comes back to this idea of weakness. And I think like I think about my story too with going to the doctor and being like stuff isn't right. You know, for the longest time it was just look at the physical symptoms. Like I thought that I had, you know, ulcers in my stomach or so, like irritable bowel syndrome or whatever. Like I went and got a freaking colonoscopy because I thought something was so bad, and the doctor was like, "This, you know, you got some of the best bowels I've seen, man. Like there's nothing going on down there." I'm like, "Well, then tell me
You're
what's
moving
happening."
and grooving down
Yeah,
there.
right. Everything's good. It was like, "Well, tell me, you know, what the hell's going on?" And you know, then just a general, you know, practice guy was like, "Hey, I think it might be this anxiety and depression thing. Like, you know, do you want to take medication?" And then I had my next reaction, which was, "Oh, medication. Like, medication's only for people who have it like just real bad." And I
Mm.
knew people who had taken medication, and but I still mentally had this picture of like medication's bad, therapy's for crazy people, and it was only until things got really bad for me that I was open to any option at that point in time. And so I tried it out. And what I don't want to have, I don't want that to be the norm. I don't want it to be that, like Don was talking about in the first episode, that you know somebody is sitting there contemplating suicide. Like I don't, it shouldn't have to get to that point for you to go seek out help, right? Like you gosh, I just had the dental analogy come back into my mind. Like, you shouldn't go to the dentist once all your teeth have fallen out, right? Like, you should go in for your cleanings, then like, yeah, floss a little bit along the way. I still don't floss though.
Well, maybe you will after today.
Probably probably not. Just this thing. I'll keep flossing this one.
So Corey J23 was like, how do we reframe vulnerability from weakness to a sign of bravery and strength? This is a great question. I've been reading a lot about, this might be a tangent, but I'm going to bring it back. I'm kind of good at going on tangents and bringing it back, but about samurais and warriors in Japan a long time ago. And they had to be strong and brave because they were slicing and dicing people, but also very vulnerable in their training. They allowed their coaches and the people around them to help shape them as humans. And they needed that trust. They needed that vulnerability between their teacher and who they were becoming. And they had to ask questions. And if the samurai wasn't prepared for war or for the fight, the coach would be like, you're not ready. Think about any kind of like boxing or MMA, right? Like, good coaches won't put a fighter in if the fighter isn't prepared enough. Maybe sometimes they will and be like, you just got to learn, like, do this fight, do this cage match. But I think part of being vulnerable is allowing ourselves to do exactly what we're doing now, is have the conversation and listen to other people and be like, maybe that sounds like a chat that's talking too much about feelings, but let me be curious. Let me be coached by people who are talking about this, so then I can become my own coach, not only for myself, but for my friends and my family too.
Yeah, I really like that. The samurai thing made me think of something that I wanted to share. But first, do you know how much training GPs get about mental health?
Mental health. I know, I'm reading this. I don't.
I imagine it to be fairly light, like probably the same amount that I got with a minor in psychology in college, if not
Yeah.
less than that.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know, but it is, I was gonna say, I can't see the username there. Nick, I think. Nick, if you do find something, will you share it with me? Because I'm quite interested in learning more about that.
Yeah, my guess is that it's probably like they know enough to see the general signs to make the referral to
Recommendation.
whatever they need. Um, but it does feel like I'd be curious to look at the data too. This is where you could just look at some numbers. Is I know for a long time the like prescription writing for antidepressants was just like going through the roof. And so I'd be curious if it's been on that same trend. Has it plateaued? Has it accelerated since COVID? Um, and same thing goes with like therapy sessions. So I'll bookmark that. That could be some good stuff to look up. But where I was going with that was I had a very spiritual experience recently, thanks to my wife and this part of the universe of my soul that I connected with. It was shared with me that in past lives, my soul has been a warrior of varying types. So when you talked about samurais, it really made me think about it, because in the conversation I was having with, like, about my past lives, which might be a little bit out there for some, but we're gonna cover the full spectrum here. Um, was about how I really didn't like the killing, and that it like ripped apart my heart because I was never actually prepared for it. And so when you were talking about not putting, sending the warrior to battle, or the fighter in, those, what's interesting is that those things are very masculine. Men can identify with warriors and fighters, but it's all about the stories that we tell. We tell the stories about battle and glory and all that. We don't talk about the training and the hard work and the discipline, and sure, you get into it sometimes, but certainly not the heart piece of it. And I think that those are when I think about this like broader ecosystem of how do we start to dismantle some of these stigmas, there's definitely a media piece, right? It's like, how is this portrayed in movies and TV shows, and how do we have more popular pop culture icons that, really embody these different definitions of masculinity and health, and vitality. So like Corey said, you've got folks that wear vulnerability as a badge of honor, just like they would how much they can bench press.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I like what you're talking about is like media and what message is the media sending out in the past about, I think, feminine and masculine energy, right? Because in my mind, the scale, excuse me, has been very tipped in terms of men and only have masculine energy. But the feminine energy very much complements the masculine. And if they're not in balance, then it's off kilter, right? And the feminine and the vulnerability is also very powerful strength. And someone that I personally listen to a lot is Joe Rogan. And I like that he says, yes, like exercise, also tell the people around you you love them. Spend time in nature, nature is feminine and masculine. It's a very powerful force. Whether someone's hunting, but you're also in tune with animals. And so I really appreciate him in that way, especially like listening as, female perspective. And I hope more and more men, like yourself included, just continue to talk about this, because I think the more it is in the media, and it's starting to grow and grow. Matt, your coach, has talked about his mental health story. There's a video that his company made about him. There's more people in the venture capital space that are talking about mental health and wellness. The CEO of Zappos, there's been quite a few articles about his mental health and wellness. And so I think, unfortunately, I hope the media isn't talking about men because they've died, but they're talking about men who are making changes. And this is how men are making changes, whether it's with Kilo or whether it's community of friends that a man is becoming more vulnerable with. I hope that is the narrative that media starts to pick up on.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it seems like there's probably a little bit of confirmation bias going on here for me too, is that I've started noticing this stuff a lot more, but it does seem like there's at least one major story that comes out a day that has something to do with mental health. I haven't seen enough of them to know like what that, like you just said, is it the story comes up when there's a tragic event, or is there more general stuff going on? I think the New York Times has been doing some good stuff lately. I think they had a piece recently that I saw get a lot of got passed around a lot about belonging and friendships. And so it's good to see these issues surfacing. It's going to continue to beg the question of like, okay, great. So then what can I go and do about it? And there is some stuff out there, but to your earlier point, there's just not nearly as much for men in particular as there is for women in specific. I think that there's just some decent stuff generally, but when you're designing an app, you can't design the app for everybody, right? You're going to be more effective if you can really hone it in on a target persona, which is why I think what you guys are up to is so cool.
Yeah. Thanks. I actually popped in my head to talk about design, and then you went there. I was like, cool, synergy. Yeah, the app is designed by women, and we very much are thinking about men thinking this thing is cool or not. And I think designing an app for men with men in mind is really essential, because if you're going to use something every day that's new, you want it to feel good, right? Like we were talking earlier, you bought a new shirt, you bought a new zip up, and you bought it because it feels good, right? And you feel good in it. You feel good wearing it. You obviously chose to put it on your meat suit, wearing it today. That's how we think of Kilo. We think of Kilo as being something that when you enter into Kilo and you input your data and you get your data visualizations and you get your insights, it at least is for a couple minutes a cool experience. Because if we're going to ask men to shift into becoming more vulnerable and checking in with oneself, why don't we also make it cool too?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think all these things just continue to add up, right? Is that if you can understand you can work with the psyche that does exist and use it to help itself, maybe subconsciously, right? Like
Yeah.
what Facebook does it to us every single day, and it's not necessarily good for us, but like I feel like you should take advantage of all these cues that you possibly can because it is going to be good for us. Like I feel like
Hmm.
you have permission to use those things so long as it is for the betterment of the user. And that's a whole different conversation for another type of podcast, that we can
Hmm.
talk about user data and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
what for people who might be listening now or later, like what do you want people to know about the app? Do you need help testing it? Should people try it out? Like how can they learn
Yeah.
more?
Thanks. Well, so you can learn more. The website is kilo.app, or you can, check us out on Instagram at kilo.app. Right now, we're launched to a closed group of testers because we want to make sure that we're really taking in all the feedback before we do a larger launch on the App Store, which fingers crossed will be coming early 2021. So if you are interested in being part of the MVP, you can request access to Kilo on our website, and then keep up to date with the information. We send out a newsletter, just sharing more information, not only about Kilo, but also educational stuff like what are the different spectrums of things one might feel when you're feeling sad. It's not just sadness, maybe it's disappointment, maybe it's dissatisfaction, to talk about how to kind of label these feelings a bit more and understand oneself a bit more. We are really excited to get a lot of feedback. So if you are someone who considers yourself an early adopter and really does like to give feedback, for an app that we are designing for you, for men, then come on over and check us out.
You've got a really great Discord little community too that's getting
Yeah.
started as well.
Thank you. I forgot about that. Yes, in our bio on the Kilo app Instagram account, I will actually share the Discord link there. Yeah, so we have a Discord server, and actually we work there. So the engineering team, the social media team, myself, Tara, our product designer, we all actually work and meet there. And then we also have community there. Like you're on there, other men who were in the pilot and have signed up for this closed tester group are on there. And it's kind of quiet right now, but we're hoping to grow the community there so that men can talk when we're not having a live conversation like this about the hard things, and feel like it's a community where they can connect with people all over the world, which is what happened to me when I used Discord. So I'm a big fan.
Yeah, that's super cool. I'll put you on the spot here. So thinking
Yeah.
like, let's imagine that you and I have a similar conversation in a year from now. What are some things that you would be hopeful would have developed or changed for men's mental health? And then second, for the Kilo community.
So what I wish would change for men's mental health? I'm a huge vision. I would love to see CDC stats in 2022 when they come out for 2021 to drastically decrease that number of suicides for men. Kilo is not an app that will help men not, with suicide or suicidal ideation. That's not what we do. But I think the fundamentals of becoming more self-aware and insightful will gradually change that metric over time. And then for Kilo with the community, I want 1 million men on by 2021. Not for the app, I meant selfishly because I want to see this stigma change and just start to dissipate, because I love men. For the majority of my life, my closest circle of friends have been men. I was a tomboy. I'm still a tomboy, whatever that means, tom girl, however people want to say it. But I possess a lot of masculine energy, and I love my masculine energy. And I've befriended more of my feminine energy as I've gotten older. And so I really want men to do that too. And the more men we have giving feedback, I believe the better we can build the app because it's a work in progress.
Yeah, that's really cool. I would also like to see a million men over the next year start to take this more seriously. I think that's a
Yeah.
great goal to shoot for. And the last thing that that you reminded me of that I didn't say earlier was this balancing of masculine and feminine energy, or whatever you want, yin and yang, whatever you want to describe it as, is like I liken it to, you've got this toolbox, like whatever you pick your craft, pick your tool. If you're a developer, you're a designer, you're a salesperson, you're a carpenter, whatever you are, but you only have access to half the tools that are out there. Like you're just not going to do as good of a job as you possibly could do if you had access to the full spectrum of the toolbox. And that's really what I think about when it comes to, the behaviors and the qualities that get labeled as masculine or as feminine. Is like, embrace them all, choose the ones that you need for the right situation, and know that you've got the rest in there for when you need them. None are necessarily good or bad. They all have a place. Because if they didn't, why would we have them in the first place?
Yeah, I think it's really easy for us to make things binary, like masculine energy is good, feminine energy is bad, because our brain likes to predict things. And if it can predict things and we can make things easier for our brain, there's less cognitive load, which we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And it is difficult. It's like growing pains, right? As a kid, you're growing, your bones hurt a little bit. I think that's how it's going to be in these early stages for men, just to be really frank. But I encourage men to hang in there, because when you strengthen a muscle, just like if you go to the gym or you're learning how to cook something new or to play a new game or learning a new language, right? It's kind of painful. Like your brain is tired, maybe you're physically tired. That's going to be part of this process. But I also think that's alluring to men. Most men you like a challenge, right? You're lions and you're hunting and you want to go after something. And so that's really important, but it's also important to come back and be like, oh, okay, that was hard. Let me now be in my den and let me now process what just happened. And I think that's so important too. Like, it's going to be a bit uncomfortable, but there's a place to come back to that will be more comfortable in the future.
There you go. And we've had a whole year, and we've got a lot more coming up of being uncomfortable. So if we haven't got okay with it, if not good with it, now's a good time to start. So as with all of our conversations, we could keep talking for hours. I look forward to having you on again in the future, but thanks so much for being here tonight and hanging out with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for everyone that's on. Unfortunately, I can't see your faces, which I wish I could, but I'm sending you loads of love. Check out Kilo if you want, or be part of our community, or just keep having these conversations, which are really, really important. Adam, thank you so much. I appreciate your energy and what you're doing for men, and we'll talk soon.
Cool. Sounds good. Talk to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
All right, everybody. Thank you for hanging out with us tonight. If you're watching this later on the recording, hopefully you enjoyed the show. You're always welcome to join us live. We love to take questions and see your comments. Shout out to Dawn and Kazas and Nick and Corey and H-Bird Harmony. That's my mom. For hanging out with us tonight and communicating and sharing your thoughts and ideas and your questions. It was great to see you all. I'm going to try to bring at least 2 of these per week. We will be here on Sunday coming up next. A friend of mine, Jesse, is going to be joining us. We are going to talk about relationships. We're going to talk about divorce. We're going to talk about career burnout and making some hard choices. So join us to get to know another guy, hear his story, and hear what he is up to. So thanks again for being here. We'll keep bringing you these conversations, opening up this topic so that you can learn from other men who are wrestling with some topics that are relevant and timely for all of us. So enjoy the rest of your evening. See you guys.
Thanks for listening to The Mandate with your host, Adam Hoffman. It's time to do your part in raising awareness of men's mental health, shifting the stigma, and having a positive impact on someone's life. Share this episode with a friend who could use some support and post it on your social channels. Have questions or thoughts? Text Adam at 512-980-3935. Find more episodes, upcoming live shows, and life-changing resources at mandateshow.com. Your mandate is to take your mental health seriously. Be courageous, stay vulnerable, live authentically. Until next time, y'all.